Hey guys, and welcome to this tutorial on dieting versus clean eating. So what I see all the time is stuff like the Twinkie diet or the McDonald's diet where people manage to eat stuff like purely McDonald's or Twinkies and they still lose weight. So that type of study interests me, and it also goes, is that the type of stuff that we need to be doing? Do we need to be doing stuff like caloric restriction and counting how many calories we have, or simply eat less if we want to lose weight? Now the flip side of that I always see is clean eating. Just eat clean and you'll lose weight. That's what the body needs. Eat clean, and that's the way to drop body fat percentage or lose kilos. So both of these guys are right. The question is, how are they right and what's the context in which they're right? So to understand that, what we're going to look at is how caloric restriction or increased calories as well as clean eating affect the processes on the cellular level. Because once we understand that, we'll understand how both of these guys have validity to their arguments, but potentially don't see that flip side of the other person's argument. So if you want a really quick synopsis of all of this and you don't want to watch the whole tutorial, basically both are right. It's just a matter of context. Okay, cool. Now, to understand what basal metabolic rate is, everyone talks about, I want to increase my basal metabolic rate, right? I want to burn calories while I sleep. Well, first of all, basal metabolic rate is the total sum of cellular processes within the body. And what that comes down to is each and every individual cell and the energy that is required for sustaining health and well-being of that cell. It's the minimal amount of calories that you can consume in a day for sustaining life, i.e. cellular function. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of what basal metabolic rate is, this is just a generic cell, and within the cell, all cells have basically these similar structures. So like the Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria. Now, each of these structures, to perform its duty within the cell, requires energy to do so. So in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, they require energy to basically make new proteins or move things in and out of the cell or build things that are needed within the cell or need to be pushed out. So each of these little structures have a function of which they're supposed to perform. And to do that, they need energy. All right, cool. So now that we've got an understanding of that, so the minimum amount of energy that we mentioned before for these little structures to perform their duty is basal metabolic rate. So say someone's consuming 2,000 calories a day. Right? 27% of their basal metabolic rate will be protein synthesis. 25%, roughly, these are guidelines, is the sodium-potassium pump. So protein synthesis is like the making of new proteins. Sodium-potassium pump moves things in and out of the cell. Right. Gluconeogenesis is the making or the regeneration of glucose, so making glucose. So what we've got here is if someone's basically consuming 2,000 calories a day, of that, their basal metabolic rate is going to be basically like more than 1,000%. 27% is protein synthesis, 25% is the sodium potassium pump. So over 1,000 calories is simply for those two functions in the cell. Now that's huge. When you think about, you got two options. One, if you wanted to lose weight, you could either continue eating your 2,000 calories per day, and then you could try and increase the percentage of protein synthesis or increase the percentage of the sodium potassium pump. So you could do stuff like resistance training. Resistance training makes more proteins. Therefore, that 27% becomes a larger percent. So you're still eating your 2,000 calories, but now you're chewing through it because you've got to make more protein. The other thing you can do is you make sure you've got a well-functioning sodium potassium pump. So people with thyroid issues, for example, they take stuff like thyroxine. That basically affects the sodium potassium pump and helps increase the percentage of total calories being consumed. So you've got two options. If you don't want to increase your protein synthesis and you don't want to increase stuff like sodium, potassium pump, gluconeogenesis, all these other functions within the cell, you can start to restrict your calories. So you could go from 2,000 to 1,800 to 1,500 calories to 1,200 calories a day, and you could start to go into caloric deficit. That way you will also lose weight, because under the energy equation, you're now basically consuming more calories. So you're consuming less calories than you're consuming in the body. Therefore, you're choosing it the other way and you'll start to lose weight. Cool. So you got options there. One, you can restrict calories, or two, you can start to improve the function at which these cellular processes are taking place. Okay, so what does a cell need to improve these cellular processes? Well, stuff like the sodium potassium pump, magnesium is vital for that. Stuff like protein synthesis requires zinc, vitamin A, the vitamin B complexes. So you got options in terms of by getting your trace minerals, your micronutrients from plant matter or from a vitamin or whatever the hell you want. Ideally, it would be whole foods, right? You can start to increase the total percentage of cellular function, and therefore you can still consume your 2,000 calories, but in theory you would lose weight because what you're doing is you're improving the function at which the cellular processes are taking place if you're getting the right macronutrients that are you deficient in and your body can use them. So what it comes down to is the health and well-being of every cell in your body. We start thinking about weight loss as just caloric restriction, and it's not that that doesn't work. It does work, and you can use that as a tool. But this really smart thing to do is first restore the health of your cell. How well does shit go on there? How well is it functioning? How do I improve that? And really simply, there's some good evidence to suggest people who are zinc deficient have lower metabolic rates, people who are iron deficient have higher BMI, so body mass index, higher levels of fat, higher levels of glucose. So there is some strong evidence to suggest that people that are low in certain minerals are deficient in the processes that are taking place in the cell. Cool. So what does the cell need? Obviously, it needs oxygen to make energy for all these little cellular processes, stuff like a fuel source, glucose, triglycerides, or worst case scenario, proteins. But then it needs all those nutrients, iron, copper, zinc, magnesium, psyllium, all these basically minerals that are so deficient in a lot of refined diets. So if you want to lose weight, you've got options. 1, reduce your calories. Cool. Keep eating what you're eating, no worries. 2, eat clean. That will help you to a point until you start eating too many calories. So the combined effect of basically eating good whole foods, or if the foods are low in certain trace minerals that you need, also taking a multivitamin, stuff like super greens, good idea. Anything that restores the health and function of the cell, and then start to reduce calories as well. Use a combined effect. Make sure you're getting the right sources in there. Make sure you're getting enough oxygen into the cell through, 1, you do resistance training, you increase mitochondria, you increase hemoglobin, myoglobin, you increase all these functioning elements that are responsible for oxygen in the cell. And make sure that you've got good sources of macronutrients, healthy fats, healthy proteins. Make sure you're eating fresh vegetables with fiber, phytonutrients, and all these general things that you guys know and have been told a million times, but for some reason, a lot of us still don't do. And if that still doesn't work, or if it's not working well enough for you, start to reduce your calories. Okay, so that's a very quick caveat, simplification of the whole process, but hopefully that gives you guys a bit of insight into terms of how caloric restriction and clean eating are both right and both have validity for ourselves and for our clients. Hope that helps. See you guys soon. Ciao.